children being assaulted. But I'm just wondering whether or not you had a comment on that.
Yeah, but I'll come back at the end.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is a kind of a follow-on from what Martin was saying about, was saying about what actually happened in Brighton. The EDL Nazis were sometimes been trying to establish a base on the south coast. And we actually got to the point where we thought we weren't going to get any EDL activity, and then we actually had a riot outside the mosque, and we had to get people down there to actually defend the mosque, and we managed to get the MP down there. It was actually quite successful. It actually woke an awful lot of people up. But our experience actually in Portsmouth was actually constantly confronting and actually mobilising against them. But what you actually saw was when they realised they weren't actually getting any traction over Islamophobia, they actually started turning against the left, etc., a classic fascist tactic, and you actually saw them mobilising against Occupy, and we actually had to get down there to defend Occupy, etc., etc., etc. But because we're constantly in their face, we didn't actually allow them to take control of the little square when we wanted to march on the War Memorial, etc., etc. This is actually causing terrible problems with them. And at Christmas, they actually announced on Facebook that EDL Portsmouth no longer actually existed because they couldn't actually function anymore. Now, I think there's a real problem at the moment. In a certain section of the left, if you actually look at what happened in Eastleigh, you actually see UKIP, which is not a fascist organisation, but using a fascist argument. And that is, rather than actually try and stir things up in multiracial areas, they go to an almost exclusively white area and actually say, you know, this is a white area, you don't want it becoming like Hackney or whatever, etc., etc. And they run a blatantly racist campaign there. And I think there's actually a real problem, because when you actually have a situation with austerity being pushed through and pushed through and pushed through, you actually have organisations like UKIP, and it's quite often that when UKIP campaign on a certain thing, you will actually get the Nazis following them into the area and actually organising. And you will actually have the Tory party actually tail-ending these things. We need to get tough on immigration. And at the same time, the Labour Party, and although there are many great Labour Party activists in the anti-fascist movement, the leadership of the Labour Party actually saying, oh, we got it wrong on immigration, we shouldn't actually. This, I think, actually creates the conditions where there will actually be a rise of fascism. And at the moment, I don't think it's going to be the EDF or the BNP, but I think that there are quite clearly the Nazis are looking at organisations like Golden Dawn, etc., etc. And I do hear on the left saying, you know, the BNP and the EDF are finished. I think there is no room for complacency at the moment. I think the situation in the next few months could get very, very dangerous indeed. And that's why we really do need to be building UAF more than ever, because the conditions are so right for a fascist movement to emerge. We don't know what it is yet, but I think it's inevitable that there will be some sort of fascist realignment, and we've actually got to be there, actually doing our stuff, getting in their face and stopping them.
Yeah, just got a couple of things to say. I'm Sue Bond from PCS, and although I spend a fair amount of my time in London now, my home is in Oldham, so I'm probably the only person near Manchester that's here today, because to be honest, I'm neither used to ornaments on a demonstration, because you can probably tell I've got an extremely bad vibe. But I wanted to pick up on the colleague from Waltham Forest and how they built We Are Waltham Forest, because about 12 years ago in Oldham, that's the way that we did it, week in, week out, sometimes just a few people in people's houses, and we did form the broadest possible front. Everyone from the mosques, from political groups, religious organisations, disabled people, LGBT people, the Afro-Caribbean Centre, all the different Muslim organisations in the town. And in a way, we became the template for UAF. But the EDL did not exist then, but in a way it was the forerunner of the EDL that attacked Muslim communities in Oldham, because they called themselves football hooligans. They were instigated by the BNP, they were orchestrated by the BNP, and they rampaged in extremely violent way right through Muslim areas, attacking people in their homes and gardens. And we learnt a lot from that. And I think today in Manchester, I think there'll be a lot of people from Oldham who will be there. There's been a huge campaign in Manchester about this. We've had statements from hundreds of people and different organisations. It was the key subject of my own union AGM in Manchester this week, where people pledged to be there. And Albert Square, where I'll just finish on this, Albert Square, where they're planning to march, is the centre of multiculturalism in Manchester. It's where they have religious festivals, it's where they have the Irish festival, it's where they have where Muslims pray, it is where the Gay Pride march, and I think we should be quite confident, I certainly am, that we will stop the EDL today, and I think that will help to inspire it when it's trying to do so.
I'm going to just ask people to come to cut it down to a couple of minutes. I've got quite a few people who put their hands up. I'm not too sure I'm going to fit you all in.
Thanks, Joe. As far as also PCS rep, I'm very proud that my union's one of the unions that's sort of like hosting this very important conference. Sue touched on AGMs, and for those of us that are trade union, this is AGM season. We had our main AGM in our branch on Thursday. And I moved the motion sort of like very much celebrating the successes of UAF, that's been touched on by speakers already, but also specifically moved as part of that motion for strengthening our ties between UAF and our Greek counterparts. Now, the reason why I mention this is that there was some opposition to this motion. And the main opposition was the fact that people didn't think that we should get involved in what they regarded as non-workplace issues. But what I pointed out, of course, was that both in Greece and in this country, when the far right go on the attack, one of the main groups of people that they attack are trade unionists. We saw this in Greece, and it's already been alluded to. It's also happened in this country to fellow PCS colleagues. I think, on conclusion, what I would say is this. As trade unionists, it's our duty to fight against injustice, both in the workplace and in the wider society, both at home and abroad, and not make that tradition continue. Thank you very much.
Hi folks, I'm Steve Haywood. I'm also from PCS. I'm the Equality Officer to our Young Members Network and the Publicity Officer to PCS Proud. Now, I spoke at our PCS annual conference 2 years ago about the need of taking trade unionism into schools and into the curriculum. We need to make it wider than that. We need to take anti-fascism into schools. We need to campaign with our colleagues from the NUT and the NASWT to take this into schools, because I've been on demonstrations in Liverpool where young people have believed the lies of the EDL and the BNP, and we need to work to get to their minds first so they can answer and say, no, that's a lie, you're a tosser, go away. In terms of, I want to speak as well on something else that happened to me personally at a counter-demonstration when the EDL were in Liverpool. I got called a faggot, I got called a puff, I got called a queer, I got called a paedophile. Now, this is an organisation that claims to have an LGBT division. Well, that's just, if they do, then, well, crikey, I hate to see how they treat their own comrades. But what we need to do is, we need to link up LGBT organisations and trade union LGBT groups, because it's not just anti-Islamic, and as this guy said on the telly once, all those, Islamic Iraqi laws and all of that. It's, trade unionists, LGBT people, they have LGBT-phobic attitudes, and we need to stop that now because we have other people that suffer hate crimes and they can't cope with the feelings they get left with after being abused in such a way is absolutely outrageous. And LGBT suicides go up, and it's, I won't say now because there's children in the room, but it's attitudes like that that cause these issues. So we need to work together, widen our campaigns, and we need to stop it now, please.
Same communication work with union and an activist and the CCACDL. And next Saturday, the National Front's coming to Swansea. We've already chucked them out the car to come to Swansea next Saturday. United Against Fascism in Wales and Swansea will get together and we will make sure that we've got enough people on the streets to make sure that their demonstration is hampered and make sure that they are penned like they were in Cambridge. However, the big question is for me is, I've been to many demonstrations against the EDLs, from Bristol to Walthamstow to many places. And last week in Cambridge, I seen the community of Cambridge come out with the activists that were organising the demonstration. And I think that's got to be key for us, because I think the fight has just begun. You know, we've had I think we've had the light fights at the present moment. The bigger fights are going to come, and we need to make sure that we have the community on board. The Sikh community, the Muslim community, the Hindu community, the Jewish community. These are communities that are most important that we have to make sure we get into. And this is going to have to be part of our campaign. Otherwise, we can actually lose the campaign. So the message is, let's get together, make sure we go out there, we enhance the communities and make sure they are part of the organisations when we do counter demonstration against any fascist organisation. Thank you.
The last speaker in this session, I'm going to bring the panel back to come afterwards. So thank you for all of you who contributed and put your hands up. I'm sorry I couldn't get some of you in.
Yeah, hello friends. My name's Sasha Sinek. I'm a Osborne shop steward up in Hackney, and I was involved in the We Are Waltham Forest campaign that humiliated the EDL. And I'm up here because I want to respond to the person who made the contribution about violence, in which he implied, I think, that it was our side, that it's the violent side when it comes to the struggle against fascism. And I don't think the facts will bear that up at all. If you look at the leadership of the EDL, they are hardcore, violent people. They are people who get off on violence. Tommy Robinson, Stephen Lennon, the leader of the EDL, has 2 convictions for leading football thugs. He likes violence. He gets off on violence. You know, there's there's an interesting article in this week's Socialist Worker that details a guy called Marcus Ward, who will be in Manchester, no doubt, today with the EDL, who's convicted for slashing people with knives, attacking anti-fascist people with knives. We had a meeting in Barking to defend multiculturalism about 2 years ago. The EDL attacked it. One guy had industrial gloves and was throwing painted glass at people. We had to take an NHS worker to the local A&E to get a hand stitched up because of the attacks. Because they are the violent ones. Our response isn't the squadist kind of response and we'll go out and beat them up. Our response is typified in what we did in Waltham Forest, because the victory in Waltham Forest was actually built long before September. When we knew they were coming, we got together and we had an argument. And we had a model, and the model was, we want the line. We want everybody who hates the Nazis on one side of the line, and we want the Nazis alone on the other, and that will be our victory. They'll be isolated by mass mobilisation. And that's what we delivered. Take away from this conference and spread throughout Europe. Our strength is in numbers. They hate us all. They want to destroy us all. We know the model. 6 million dead. That's what they're after. That's their violence. We will stop them by any means necessary, but actually the best ways are by mass mobilisation.
Thank you to all of you that contributed. I'm going to bring the speakers back in the same order that they started on. So, Stephen Saxby, thanks.
Well, thanks everyone for those contributions. I'd like to make 3 brief points. The first is that we need to do the groundwork, as was mentioned, and to be that groundwork is about building thick relationships in local communities. And for those people who say, well, how do we involve this community or that community? I tell you what, go and talk to them. You know, just go and have a one-to-one chat. You know, phone them up, can I have a coffee? Can we have a talk? And get people alongside. You know, that's exactly what we do in Walking Forest. And some of those relationships going back a long time, but others building new relationships with people we know key in the community to work with us. And, you know, we all to be grounded in our local communities, having good relationships with everybody there. So let's do that work patiently, on the ground, all the time. Because when we have crisis points, then we'll see the value of it by people turning out because they know that they respect us and that we're all working together for the common good. The second thing is about violence. Whereas I support everything that Sasha just said, we also need to be aware that there were people, and we understand it, who responded to the threat of the EDL coming with a kind of mindset of, if they're going to come and be violent towards us, let's respond in violence. That's why we made sure that our campaign was based on the notion of being peaceful. We were clear about that in all of our public meetings, that our response, bringing people out onto the street, was going to be peaceful. And that was very effective, in fact, getting all sorts of people out who might otherwise stayed away. We worked hard as well with the Council of Mosques, who provided hundreds of stewards to make sure that we presented a notion of peace, of salam, on the day. And we were doing all we could on the day to try and make sure that everybody was peaceful. There were, I didn't see it myself, but I heard it from good sources, there were people who were throwing things. I think that was a very small minority, because most of the people were out with such a good sense of goodwill on the day, such a sense of unity. I was dancing, other people were dancing, there was music. I tell you, it was absolutely great. And afterwards, people were so energised that we had this positive coming out together in peace to defeat the EDL. So violence is an issue, but you know, let's be clear in all of our communication around opposing the EDL that we stand for peaceful people coming together to actually oppose this kind of hatred. And the third thing is on the multiculturalism. I'm sorry I didn't stress that enough before. Joe was absolutely right to say that was a real flank of our campaign. We were being positive about the community. We are Walking Forest, a united multicultural community. I do think we need to do more work on intentional cross-cultural engagement. You know, sometimes we talk about being multicultural because we've got groups that are out together. But we need actually, as I said at the beginning, thick one-to-one relationships across cultures. And that's one of the reasons why one of the developments of work we're doing is the Walthamstow Migrants Action Group, which is working intentionally on building those relationships. So do the groundwork, make it peaceful, and do celebrate the multiculturalism of our communities.
Thank you.
Joe, thank you. I'll be brief. I've got to catch a 12:40 train up to Manchester for a certain football match. Well, the first point is, the sister criticised my comments about the Met. Look, my criticism isn't aimed at the body of elites. My criticisms are aimed at the police commissioner and area commanders above. I think they could do a lot more. With the laws, the interpretations of the laws and powers they've got. Let's face it, many of the EDL people we're talking about have criminal convictions. I pointed out one example where the area commander in my home borough, the City of Westminster, could have done something quite profound if she wanted to, and stop the bugger standing in Rotherham as a basis of the crossbow. She chose not to. That's where my criticism is levelled. I will almost certainly, when I get on this train, hopefully, to Piccadilly and have police protecting me, get into old traffic. And I appreciate that, and I'm prepared to support that, as I have done as a Assembly member and the previous mayor. We actually put out the biggest spread of neighbourhood policing this city has ever seen. And it's now being drawn back, and I will defend police as long as they're on the beat. But I have got issues with those driving the policy, because if they can't see the links between the EDL and terrorist fascists like the guy in Norway and the potential threat this has here, then I will continue to point out these inconsistencies. Can I, though, saying that, can I end on a positive note? I have a colleague from Sikhs Against EDL. I certainly welcome that, because one of the biggest confusions amongst all the Muslim communities that I come across in London has been the oddity of seeing confused Sikh members of the EDL. And I'm glad you're making those efforts, and I'd like to see similar efforts, hopefully with Israelis who seem to support the EDL because of their Islamophobia. believe you me, the Abrahamic tradition's got a lot more in common than they realise and admit amongst all the protagonists. And that's certainly welcome, and I think that's the way to go forward. All communities, whether they be religious, ethnic, and yes, different political camps, getting together on this issue, because this is the basis on which a broad alliance can make a difference against the fascists.
Mo, I'm looking at the scarf that you're wearing. I won't have a great deal of sympathy if you miss that train. On a serious note, I think the question about violence has been very well answered by Sasha and by Father Saxby. And I would just add this, that the violence of a few people throwing a few things at the EDL is as nothing compared to what Anders Breivik did in Norway. It's as nothing compared to what David Copeland, the fascist who attacked Brick Lane and Brixton and other areas in the 1990s did. It's as nothing compared to the murders of 6 million people during Hitler's reign in Germany. So let's get things into perspective when we talk about violence. I have to be careful what I say as a lawyer, but I have and I will continue to defend in the courts people who have been accused of attacking the fascists, and I'm proud to stand and support and represent those people. But I think, as Sasha said very eloquently, ours isn't and never has been an approach of squadism. Let's get small numbers of people to go and take them on. Our approach always has been about mobilising the masses, the millions of people who stand for a multicultural society. The slogan that we have is "We are the many, they are the few," and it's about isolating those people. I just wanted to pick up on some of the things that Colette said in the opening contribution from the floor, because I think there was a lot in there that was very, very important. Firstly, I mean, one of the things as well about violence, you said something about the police. I remember a demonstration against the BNP headquarters in the 1990s, 60,000 strong demonstration that was led by Leon Greenman, a Holocaust survivor in his 80s. He was at the front of that demonstration. And what was the attitude of the police? The attitude of the police was to protect the headquarters of the BNP and to attack the demonstration. And the chief steward of that demonstration, a very dear friend of mine, Julie Waterson, who tragically died very young, in her mid-50s, at the end of last year. She was smashed over the head by the police when she was stewarding that demonstration. So let's not have any illusions in the police protecting our side. The other point I wanted to make was, you made the point about Le Pen when he said the thing about the Holocaust being a detail of history. That actually, when people exposed Le Pen for saying that was one of the moments when his popularity plummeted, when people pinned the label of Nazi and fascist on Le Pen. Sadly, and I've been on many demonstrations in France, huge anti-racist demonstrations which show the potential for driving back the fascists. The tragedy has been that far too often, instead of pinning that label upon Jean-Marie Le Pen and Marine Le Pen today, people took the soft option of simply talking about racism. The reason why we have had a much greater degree of success in driving the fascists back in this country is because we have labelled them for what they are, fascists and Nazis, and that has mobilised people in our I want to make too is this, and I think Dave from Plymouth made the point about how it's more difficult in more rural areas, less multicultural areas to mobilise people. I think that's right, but it is possible. One of the reasons why organisations like Love Music Hate Racism have been successful is because they have taken multiculturalism around music, around culture, and have used it as a base to bring young people together, and within that we've been able to carry the wider arguments about the need to take on and confront people like the fascists. There was a point about someone talked very, very quickly. Someone talked about the protest that's taking place in Swansea. Yeah? Swansea won the League Cup last week, didn't they? And who's the captain of Swansea City? The black player. That, you know, you talk at the people who love Swansea City, talk to them on that basis, you know, look at our football team, look at the nature of it, that's the basis of bringing people together. And when we bring people together, it gives us the potential for the kinds of mobilisation and organisation that can drive the fascists back for good.
Just to round up the session and before we finish, Sammy Darling, thanks.
Well, I want to come back on 2 points really. Firstly, in relation to Colette's point about France, because I very much agree that there is a tradition of opposing fascism, and there are many people that organise and oppose fascism. But what I think is lacking is the unity of the broad range of the majority of people in France that oppose fascism, but there isn't an organisation that unites that and that people can rally behind. And crucially, the left and centre-left are divided. So I very much welcome Laura's contribution about why it's important to unite against fascism and accept disagreements on international issues and austerity and the cuts and so on, and unite on what we agree with opposing fascism. And that tradition is lacking in France. And I think that's the problem. But obviously, we can't export what we do here to France. People there have to agree with us and unite and mobilise on that basis. But what we are doing is increasing our dialogue with other European countries about what we can all do on the ground to oppose fascism. And one of the things that we are discussing, learning from the successful united action that we had on 19th of January in solidarity with the major Athens demonstration opposing Golden Dawn. We had a very big demonstration, freezing temperatures here outside the Greek embassy. Hundreds of people turned up. It was, a really great event to be involved with. And so what we're doing is learning from that and increasing our coordination and our discussion with other European countries. And what we're discussing is trying to have the same level of united, coordinated action across Europe against fascism in all different European countries in the run-up to the European elections. So we want a fascist-free European Parliament. And so that's the last point on the statement. If I can